The morning fog hung thick over Windsor Castle like a gray blanket, muffling the sounds of the awakening grounds. Sergeant William Hayes adjusted his red tunic and checked his pocket watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 20 years of service to the Crown had taught him that punctuality wasn't just expected, it was sacred. At precisely 0600 hours, he would begin his rounds, just as he had every morning since being assigned to the Royal Protection Detail. William had seen 3 different monarchs during his service, witnessed countless state ceremonies, and stood guard during some of the most significant moments in modern British history. Yet something about this particular morning felt different. Perhaps it was the way the ancient stones seemed to whisper secrets in the wind, or how the shadows appeared to dance with unusual urgency in the early light. He couldn't quite place it, but his instincts, honed by years of military training and royal service, told him today would be unlike any other. The castle grounds were unusually quiet. Most of the staff wouldn't arrive for another hour, and the royal family typically didn't stir until much later. This was William's favorite time of day, when he could walk the corridors and courtyards in relative solitude, feeling the weight of history in every stone beneath his feet. Windsor Castle had stood for nearly 1,000 years, and he was just one small part of its continuing story. As he made his way through the state apartments, William reflected on how he had come to this position. Born in a small village in Yorkshire, he had never imagined he would one day walk these hallowed halls as a protector of the realm. His father had been a coal miner, his mother a seamstress, and they had raised him with simple values: hard work, honesty, and loyalty. These principles had served him well in the army, where he had distinguished himself in Northern Ireland and later in peacekeeping missions abroad. The transition from regular military service to the Royal Protection Detail had been rigorous. Months of additional training, psychological evaluations, and security clearances had preceded his appointment. Every aspect of his life had been scrutinized, from his financial history to his personal relationships. The Crown took no chances when it came to those entrusted with the safety of the royal family. William paused at one of the tall windows overlooking the long walk, watching as the first joggers of the day made their way along the tree-lined avenue. In the distance, he could see the lights of London beginning to twinkle in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in that sprawling metropolis, millions of people were starting their day, completely unaware of the secrets and responsibilities that lay within these ancient walls. The radio clipped to his shoulder crackled to life. Control to Alpha 7, status report. Alpha 7, all clear on the state apartments. Beginning second sector sweep. Copy that, Alpha 7. Be advised, we have an early visitor scheduled for 0800 hours. Details to follow. An early visitor wasn't unusual, but something in the controller's tone suggested this wasn't a routine appointment. William had learned to read between the lines during his years of service. When security personnel used certain inflections or phrases, it often meant they were dealing with something sensitive or potentially problematic. As he continued his rounds, William's mind wandered to his family. His wife Sarah would be getting their twin daughters ready for school about now. Emma and Lucy were 15 at that age where everything their parents did embarrassed them, but they still took pride in telling their friends that their father worked for the Queen. It wasn't entirely accurate. His direct responsibilities were much more complex than that simple description suggested. But it was easier than explaining the intricacies of royal protection protocols. The girls had visited the castle twice during special family days organized for staff members. William would never forget the look of wonder in their eyes as they walked through rooms where kings and queens had lived and died, where history had been made and unmade countless times. It had given him a renewed appreciation for his role, seeing it through their innocent perspective. He entered the private apartment section where security was even tighter and protocols more stringent. Here, every door required a different access code, every corridor was monitored by multiple camera systems, and every person who entered was tracked and logged. William had memorized dozens of procedures for this area alone, from emergency evacuation routes to communication protocols for various threat levels. The private apartments were where the royal family actually lived when in residence at Windsor. Unlike the state apartments, which were designed to impress visiting dignitaries and showcase the monarchy's grandeur, these rooms were more intimate, more personal. William had caught glimpses of family photographs, personal mementos, and the everyday objects that made these spaces homes rather than museums. It was in this section that William first noticed something amiss. A door that should have been locked was slightly ajar. The reading room, used primarily by Prince Charles for his extensive correspondence and private meetings, was never left unsecured. William's hand instinctively moved to his radio as he approached cautiously. Training kicked in automatically. He assessed the situation quickly. No signs of forced entry, no indication of disturbance. But protocol was protocol. Any deviation from normal security arrangements had to be investigated and reported immediately. William pushed the door open slowly, his other hand resting on the emergency alarm button on his belt. The room appeared empty, but William could sense a presence. Years of military experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were telling him he wasn't alone. He stepped inside, moving with the careful precision of someone trained to expect the unexpected. "Hello?" he called softly, not wanting to wake the entire castle if this turned out to be nothing more than a maintenance issue or a door that hadn't been properly secured the night before. A figure emerged from behind one of the tall bookcases that lined the room. William's tension eased slightly as he recognized Prince Charles, though his confusion increased. The prince was fully dressed despite the early hour, and he appeared to be searching for something among the books and papers. "Your Royal Highness," William said, standing at attention. "I wasn't aware you were in residence this early. My apologies for the intrusion." Prince Charles turned, and William was struck by the expression on his face. In all his years of service, he had seen the prince in various moods and circumstances, but never quite like this. There was a weight in his eyes, a gravity that suggested he was grappling with something far beyond the usual concerns of royal duty. "William, isn't it?" the prince said, his voice quieter than usual. "You've been with us for some time now. 22 years next month." William was surprised that the prince knew his name. While they had interacted professionally on numerous occasions, he hadn't expected his identity to be so readily recalled. 22 years, Prince Charles repeated, as if contemplating the significance of that span of time. "You've seen quite a lot during your service, I imagine. Heard things, observed things that never make it into the newspapers or history books." William wasn't sure how to respond. The comment seemed to be leading somewhere, but royal protocol discouraged casual conversation unless initiated by the royal family member. He remained silent, waiting for further guidance. Prince Charles moved to the window, gazing out at the grounds where morning light was beginning to chase away the shadows. "Tell me, William, in all your years of service, have you ever encountered something that challenged everything you thought you knew about duty, about loyalty, about the very nature of service to the crown?" William felt as though he was being drawn into a conversation that went far beyond his role as a security officer. Yet something in the prince's demeanor suggested this wasn't idle curiosity or royal small talk. "I'm not sure I understand, sir," William replied carefully. "No, I suppose you wouldn't," Prince Charles said, turning back to face him. "Not yet, anyway. But I have a feeling that's about to change." Before William could ask what the prince meant, his radio crackled again. "Control to Alpha 7. Please confirm your location. We have the early visitor arriving ahead of schedule." William glanced at his watch. It was only 0645 hours. Alpha 7 in the private apartments conducting routine security check. "Who is the early arrival?" I'm sorry, there was a pause before the response came. "Classified briefing required. Please report to control immediately after completing your current assignment." Prince Charles had been listening to this exchange, and William noticed that his expression had grown even more serious. "William," the prince said quietly, "I need you to understand something. What you're about to become involved in goes far beyond normal royal protection duties. Are you prepared for that?" William felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air seeping through the ancient windows. In 22 years of service, he had never been asked such a question by a member of the royal family. He had signed confidentiality agreements, taken oaths of loyalty, and understood that his role sometimes required him to be privy to sensitive information. But this felt different, more personal, more dangerous somehow. "I serve at the pleasure of the crown, sir," he replied, falling back on the formal response he had been trained to give in uncertain situations. "Yes," Prince Charles said with what might have been a sad smile. "I know you do. The question is whether that service can withstand what you're about to learn." The prince moved back to the bookcase where William had first spotted him and withdrew a thick folder from between 2 volumes of parliamentary proceedings. The folder was unmarked except for a small red seal that William didn't recognize. "This arrived by special courier late last night," Prince Charles explained, holding the folder carefully, as if it contained something volatile. "Its contents concern a matter that has been kept secret for decades, something that could fundamentally alter the public's understanding of the monarchy and Britain's place in the world." William's training told him to step back, to excuse himself and report to control as ordered. But something in the prince's manner kept him rooted in place. He sensed that he was witnessing a moment of profound significance, though he couldn't yet understand its nature. "Sir, perhaps this conversation should wait until after I've received my briefing from control," William suggested, trying to maintain proper protocol even as his curiosity grew. "I'm afraid the briefing you're about to receive is directly related to this," Prince Charles said, tapping the folder. "And I wanted you to hear it from me first, to understand the context before you're asked to make decisions that will affect not just your career, but your entire understanding of what it means to serve this institution." The radio interrupted them again. "Alpha 7, immediate response required. Please report to control." William looked at Prince Charles, torn between his duty to respond to orders and his growing realization that something extraordinary was unfolding in this quiet room. The prince seemed to understand his dilemma. "Go," he said. "Report as ordered, but remember what I've told you here. And William?" He paused until William met his eyes. "Whatever you learn in that briefing, whatever you're asked to do, remember that loyalty sometimes requires us to question the very institutions we've sworn to protect." As William left the reading room and made his way toward control, his mind raced with questions. In all his years of service, he had prided himself on his clear understanding of his role and responsibilities. He protected the royal family, maintained security protocols, and served the crown with unwavering dedication. It had been straightforward, honorable work that gave his life meaning and purpose. Now, with just a few cryptic comments and the sight of a mysterious folder, that certainty was beginning to crack. The prince's words echoed in his mind. "Loyalty sometimes requires us to question the very institutions we've sworn to protect." What could possibly justify such a statement from someone who embodied those very institutions? The control room was located in the castle's basement, a modern facility hidden beneath centuries of history. As William descended the stone steps, he felt as though he was moving not just deeper into the castle, but deeper into a world he had never known existed. The morning that had begun with routine rounds and familiar procedures was transforming into something entirely different. At the control room door, William paused to collect himself. Whatever lay beyond that threshold would change everything. He could feel it in the same way he had sensed danger during his military service abroad. Some instincts transcended training and experience, speaking to something deeper in human nature. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and knocked on the door. The voice that answered was crisp and official. "Enter." As William stepped into the control room, he had no idea that he was crossing a line that would separate his life into 2 distinct chapters. The 22 years of service that had brought him to this moment, and whatever was about to begin. The morning fog was beginning to lift from the castle grounds outside, but for Sergeant William Hayes, the real fog, the comfortable uncertainty of routine duty, was just beginning to descend. The control room buzzed with an energy William had never experienced before. Instead of the usual skeleton crew of morning shift personnel, the space was crowded with officials he didn't recognize. Men and women in expensive suits sat alongside uniformed officers from various services, all focused on multiple screens displaying information he couldn't immediately decipher. The atmosphere was electric with tension and urgency. Commander Patricia Reynolds, the head of Royal Protection, stood at the center of it all. A 25-year veteran of Scotland Yard, she was known for her unflappable demeanor and razor-sharp intelligence. William had worked under her command for 7 years and had never seen her look quite so grave. "Sergeant Hayes," she said without looking up from the documents spread across her desk, "please take a seat. We have a great deal to discuss." William sat in the indicated chair, acutely aware that every person in the room was watching him. The sensation was unnerving, as if he were being evaluated for something far beyond his usual duties. He noticed that several of the unknown officials were making notes as they observed him, adding to his growing unease. "Before we begin," Commander Reynolds continued, "I need to remind you that everything discussed in this room is classified at the highest levels of government security. The Official Secrets Act applies, as do several additional protocols specific to this situation. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," William replied, though he was beginning to wonder what situation could possibly require such extraordinary measures. "Good." Reynolds finally looked up, fixing him with a steady gaze. "Sergeant Hayes, in your 22 years of service, you have demonstrated exceptional loyalty, discretion, and competence. Your psychological evaluations consistently rate you as highly stable and trustworthy. Your military record shows courage under fire and unquestioning dedication to duty. Is this an accurate assessment of your character?" The formal tone and the presence of so many observers made William feel as though he were being interrogated rather than briefed. "I believe so, ma'am. I've always tried to serve to the best of my abilities." "Indeed you have," said a voice from the back of the room. William turned to see a distinguished man in his 60s rising from his chair. He had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, and when he spoke, the entire room fell silent. "Sergeant Hayes, I am Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, Cabinet Secretary. I've been briefed on your service record, and I must say it's exemplary. However, we are about to ask something of you that goes far beyond your normal duties." William felt his pulse quicken. Cabinet Secretary was one of the highest-ranking civil service positions in the British government. His presence in this room suggested that whatever was happening had implications far beyond Windsor Castle. "We find ourselves," Sir Geoffrey continued, "in possession of information that threatens the very foundation of the constitutional monarchy. Information that, if made public without proper context and preparation, could destabilize not just the royal family, but the entire British government." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. William struggled to process what he was hearing. How could any piece of information be so significant that it would require the involvement of the Cabinet Secretary and this room full of officials? Commander Reynolds stepped forward, carrying a thick file that William recognized as similar to the one Prince Charles had shown him earlier. 3 days ago, a former intelligence officer named Marcus Pemberton approached the Foreign Office with documents he claimed would expose a decades-old conspiracy involving the royal family. Initially, his allegations were dismissed as the ravings of a disgruntled ex-employee seeking attention or financial gain. She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to sink in. "However, upon investigation, we discovered that Pemberton's documents are authentic. They detail operations conducted in the 1970s and 1980s that were officially denied by the government and have never been acknowledged by the palace." William felt a chill run down his spine. The 70s and 1980s had been turbulent times in British politics and international relations. The troubles in Northern Ireland, the Cold War, various international conflicts. Any number of events could have generated the kind of sensitive material that would still be classified decades later. "What kind of operations?" William asked, surprising himself with his boldness in questioning such high-ranking officials. Sir Geoffrey exchanged glances with Commander Reynolds before answering. "Operations that involved members of the royal family in activities that would be considered inappropriate for their constitutional role. Activities that, if revealed, would call into question the political neutrality of the monarchy and potentially violate several international treaties." The room seemed to close in around William as he tried to comprehend the implications. The constitutional monarchy was built on the principle that the royal family remained above politics, serving as neutral symbols of national unity. Any suggestion that they had been involved in covert political or military operations would indeed threaten the very foundation of the system. "Pemberton is scheduled to meet with Prince Charles this morning," Commander Reynolds continued. "He has demanded a private audience, threatening to take his documents to the international press if his demands are not met. Our intelligence suggests he has already made contact with journalists in several countries." William's mind raced back to his encounter with Prince Charles in the reading room. The prince's strange questions and cryptic warnings suddenly made sense. He had known this meeting was coming, had been preparing for it, perhaps dreading it. "What exactly is my role in all of this?" William asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "You will be the only security officer present during the meeting," Sir Geoffrey replied. "Given the sensitivity of the situation, we cannot risk having multiple witnesses to whatever Pemberton reveals. Your job will be to ensure the physical safety of Prince Charles, while also serving as our eyes and ears in that room." The weight of responsibility settled on William's shoulders like a lead blanket. In his years of service, he had protected royalty during public events, foreign visits, and private functions, but those had been straightforward security assignments. This was something entirely different. He was being asked to be a witness to potential revelations that could change history. "There's more," Commander Reynolds said, consulting her notes. "Our psychological profile of Pemberton suggests he is unstable, possibly delusional. He may be armed, and there's a significant risk that this meeting could turn violent. We need someone there who can protect the prince while also being prepared to manage the situation if necessary." The euphemistic language didn't disguise the meaning. William was being prepared for the possibility that he might need to use force to protect not just Prince Charles's life, but the monarchy itself. The thought made his stomach churn. "I need to understand something," William said, finding his voice despite his growing anxiety. "Are these allegations true? Has the royal family actually been involved in the activities Pemberton claims?" The silence that followed his question was answer enough. Sir Geoffrey finally spoke, his voice heavy with resignation. "The truth, Sergeant Hayes, is often more complicated than simple yes or no answers. What matters now is not what happened decades ago, but how we handle the present crisis." A technician at one of the computer terminals looked up. "Sir, the vehicle carrying Pemberton has just passed through the first security checkpoint. ETA to the castle is 15 minutes. The room erupted into controlled activity. Officials gathered their papers, spoke in hushed tones into secure phones, and prepared to monitor the meeting from their various positions. William felt like he was watching a choreographed performance, one that had been rehearsed many times, even though this particular scenario was unprecedented. Commander Reynolds approached him with a small communications device. "This is a specialized transmitter," she explained. "It will allow us to monitor the conversation in the reading room. If the situation becomes dangerous, use the code phrase, Red Dragon, and we'll intervene immediately." William clipped the device to his collar, trying to appear calm despite the chaos in his mind. In less than 15 minutes, he would be standing in a room with Prince Charles and a potentially dangerous former intelligence officer, listening to revelations that could destroy everything he had spent his adult life protecting. "One more thing," Sir Geoffrey said, pulling William aside as the others continued their preparations. "Whatever you hear in that room, whatever documents you see, whatever accusations are made, remember that your duty is to the crown, not to any individual member of the royal family. Sometimes those loyalties can conflict, and when they do, you must choose the greater good." The words echoed Prince Charles's earlier warning about questioning the institutions one had sworn to protect. William was beginning to understand that he was caught between competing definitions of duty and loyalty, forced to navigate a situation where the right choice might not be obvious. As he left the control room and made his way back to the private apartments, William reflected on how his life had changed in the space of a single morning. He had awakened as a routine security officer, confident in his role and responsibilities. Now he was walking toward a meeting that could alter the course of British history, carrying the weight of institutional loyalty and personal conscience. The castle corridors seemed different as he walked through them, as if the very stones were whispering secrets he had never been meant to hear. Portraits of past monarchs gazed down at him from their gilded frames, and he wondered if any of them had faced moments like this, when the survival of the monarchy itself hung in the balance. When William reached the reading room, he found Prince Charles exactly where he had left him, though the mysterious folder was no longer visible. The prince looked up as he entered, and William saw a mixture of resignation and determination in his eyes. "I trust your briefing was illuminating," Prince Charles said with bitter irony. "Yes, sir," William replied, not knowing what else to say. "And now you understand why I asked whether your loyalty could withstand what you were about to learn." The prince moved to the window again, watching as a black sedan made its way up the long walk toward the castle. "That vehicle carries a man who believes he can destroy everything my family has represented for generations. He may be right. William watched the approaching car with growing dread. Inside that vehicle was Marcus Pemberton, a man whose revelations could topple the monarchy. In minutes, he would be face to face with whatever dark secrets the royal family had been hiding. "Sir," William said carefully, "whatever happened in the past, whatever these documents contain, my duty remains the same. I'm here to protect you." Prince Charles turned from the window, and for the first time that morning, William saw something like gratitude in his expression. "Thank you, William. I hope that after today you'll still feel the same way." The radio crackled one final time. "Control to Alpha 7. Subject has arrived and is being escorted to your location. Be advised, he is carrying a briefcase and appears agitated." William took his position by the door, his hand resting on his radio. In his 22 years of service, he had never been more aware of the weight of history pressing down on him. The next hour would test everything he believed about duty, loyalty, and the nature of the institution he had sworn to protect. As footsteps approached in the corridor outside, William realized that the comfortable certainties of his former life were about to be stripped away forever. Whatever Marcus Pemberton was bringing to this meeting would change everything, and there would be no going back to the simple faith he had once placed in the crown. The door opened, and history held its breath. Marcus Pemberton was not what William had expected. The psychological profile had prepared him for someone unstable and potentially dangerous. But the man who entered the reading room appeared calm, almost scholarly. He was in his early 60s, dressed in a well-worn but expensive suit, carrying a battered leather briefcase that looked like it had seen decades of use. His most striking feature was his eyes. Sharp, intelligent, and filled with the weight of secrets that had been carried too long. "Your Royal Highness," Pemberton said with a slight bow, his voice cultured but carrying an undercurrent of tension. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. I know this meeting comes under unusual circumstances." But Prince Charles nodded curtly. "Mr. Pemberton, I trust you understand the gravity of what you're claiming to possess." "Indeed I do," Pemberton replied, setting his briefcase on the reading table, "perhaps more than you realize." William positioned himself near the door, close enough to intervene if necessary, but far enough away to avoid seeming threatening. The transmitter on his collar felt unnaturally heavy, a constant reminder that everything said in this room would be monitored and analyzed by the team in control. Pemberton opened his briefcase with deliberate care, revealing several manila folders, each marked with different classification stamps and dates, spanning from 1974 to 1987. The sight of those folders made William's stomach clench. Whatever they contained had been significant enough to remain classified for nearly 40 years. "Before we begin," Pemberton said, "I want you to understand my motivations, Your Highness. I am not here for money or fame. I am here because I am dying." The simple statement hung in the air like a thunderclap. Prince Charles's composure flickered for just a moment, revealing something that might have been sympathy. "Cancer," Pemberton continued matter-of-factly. 6 months, perhaps less. "After a lifetime of keeping secrets for Queen and country, I find myself facing eternity with the weight of these particular secrets becoming unbearable." He withdrew the first folder and placed it on the table. "Operation Sovereign Shield. Are you familiar with that designation, sir?" William saw Prince Charles stiffen almost imperceptibly. Whatever Operation Sovereign Shield was, the prince knew about it. "I am," Prince Charles replied carefully. "Then you know what I'm about to reveal." Pemberton opened the folder, revealing photographs, documents, and what appeared to be transcripts of conversations. In 1970, at the height of the Iranian hostage crisis, certain elements within the British government became concerned about the potential for similar incidents targeting British interests worldwide. Pemberton's voice took on the measured cadence of a professional briefing. The decision was made to create a covert response capability that could operate outside normal diplomatic and military channels. A capability that would have the full backing of the Crown, but complete deniability if exposed. William felt his understanding of British government begin to crack. What Pemberton was describing sounded like the formation of an assassination squad or terrorist unit operating under royal authority. The operation required someone with unquestioned patriotism, access to international contacts, and the ability to move freely without attracting suspicion. Pemberton continued. Someone who could recruit assets, authorize operations, and provide political cover when necessary. Prince Charles remained silent, but William could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the arms of his chair. "Your younger brother, Prince Andrew, was perfect for the role," Pemberton said quietly. "Young, eager to serve, and with a military background that provided the necessary skills and contacts." William felt the world shift around him. Prince Andrew, involved in covert operations? The idea was so far outside his understanding of royal protocol that he struggled to process it. Andrew wasn't the only one involved, Pemberton continued, withdrawing more documents. The operation required coordination at the highest levels. Someone had to provide political guidance, approve targets, and ensure that operations aligned with broader British interests. He looked directly at Prince Charles, someone who would one day be king. The accusation hit the room like a physical blow. William's hand instinctively moved toward his radio, but he caught himself. This wasn't a physical threat. It was something far more dangerous. The very foundations of the constitutional monarchy were being systematically dismantled by a dying man with nothing left to lose. "You're claiming," Prince Charles said slowly, "that I was involved in authorizing covert operations while serving as heir to the throne?" "I'm not claiming it," Pemberton replied, opening another folder. "I'm documenting it." He spread photographs across the table. Images of Prince Charles in various locations, meeting with people William didn't recognize. Some appeared to be taken at social events, others in more private settings. All were dated between 1980 and 1985. "This photograph was taken in Monaco, 1982, Pemberton explained, pointing to one image. "The man you're speaking with is Colonel Hassan Nazari, former Iranian Revolutionary Guard who defected to British intelligence in 1981. 3 weeks after this meeting, Nazari orchestrated the assassination of 2 Iranian operatives in Paris, who were planning attacks on British oil facilities in the North Sea." William stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile the young Prince Charles shaking hands with a man who apparently became an assassin on behalf of British interests. "This one," Pemberton continued, indicating another photograph, "was taken in Switzerland, 1984. You're meeting with arms dealer Victor Constantine, who subsequently provided weapons to resistance groups in Afghanistan fighting Soviet occupation. The funding for those weapons came through accounts controlled by Operation Sovereign Shield." Each revelation was more shocking than the last. William had spent his adult life believing in the political neutrality of the royal family, in their role as symbolic figureheads who remained above the messy business of international politics. The idea that they had been actively involved in covert operations, assassination plots, and arms dealing was staggering. "Why are you telling me this now?" Prince Charles asked, his voice strained. "Because the world is about to change," Pemberton replied. "The Cold War is over, but new threats are emerging. Terrorism, international crime syndicates, rogue states with nuclear ambitions. Some people in government believe it's time to reactivate Operation Sovereign Shield." William felt his blood run cold. If what Pemberton was saying was true, then this meeting wasn't just about exposing past activities. It was about preventing future ones. "They want you to resume your former role," Pemberton continued. "As king, you would have even more access, more credibility, more ability to operate without suspicion. The operation could expand beyond anything we attempted in the 1980s. Prince Charles stood abruptly, moving to the window as if trying to escape the weight of Pemberton's revelations. "And if I refuse? Then they'll find other ways to achieve their objectives," Pemberton said grimly. "Ways that might be far less elegant than royal involvement." William's mind raced as he tried to process the implications. If the government was planning to reactivate covert operations and expected royal participation, it would fundamentally alter the nature of the monarchy. The crown would no longer be a neutral symbol of national unity. It would be an active participant in international espionage and potentially violence. "There's more," Pemberton said, opening the final folder. "The records I've brought today represent only a fraction of what Operation Sovereign Shield accomplished. There are other files, other documents, other photographs, evidence of operations in Ireland, South America, Eastern Europe, the Middle East." He paused, looking directly at Prince Charles. "Evidence of operations that resulted in deaths regime changes, international incidents that were blamed on other actors. Your family's involvement goes far deeper than even you might realize. William watched Prince Charles's reflection in the window, seeing a man grappling with revelations that challenged everything he thought he knew about his own life and family. The prince who had seemed so composed earlier was now visibly struggling with the weight of Pemberton's accusations. "What do you want from me?" Prince Charles asked finally, turning back to face Pemberton. "I want you to understand what you're being asked to become," Pemberton replied. "And I want you to have the choice that I never had. When I joined Operation Sovereign Shield, I believed I was serving my country. It took me decades to realize I was serving something else entirely." "What do you mean?" William found himself asking, breaking his silent observation. Pemberton turned to look at him, and William saw profound sadness in the man's eyes. "The operation stopped being about protecting British interests years ago, Sergeant. It became about protecting the interests of a small group of powerful individuals who use the Crown's authority to advance their own agenda." The accusation hung in the air like poison. If Pemberton was right, then Operation Sovereign Shield hadn't been a patriotic defense of British interests. It had been a tool for corruption and personal gain, using the royal family as unwitting cover. "You're claiming that my family has been manipulated," Prince Charles said slowly. "Used as a front for criminal activity? I'm claiming that the line between national security and personal interest became so blurred that it disappeared entirely." Pemberton replied. "The people who want to reactivate the operation aren't concerned with protecting Britain. They're concerned with protecting themselves." William felt his worldview continuing to crumble. Everything he had believed about duty, loyalty, and service to the Crown was being systematically destroyed by revelations of corruption and manipulation at the highest levels of government. "Why should I believe you?" Prince Charles demanded. "You're a dying man with a grudge against the intelligence services. How do I know this isn't all fabricated revenge?" Pemberton smiled sadly. "Because, sir, you've already seen some of these documents before. The folder you were examining when Sergeant Hayes found you this morning. That contains preliminary briefings about the operation's reactivation. You've been preparing for this meeting because you knew what I was going to tell you." The admission hit William like a physical blow. Prince Charles had known about at least some of these allegations, had been grappling with them before Pemberton ever arrived. The morning's strange conversation suddenly made perfect sense. "The question now," Pemberton continued, "is what you're going to do about it. The people behind this operation are powerful, well-connected, and absolutely ruthless. They've spent decades building networks of influence and control. Opposing them won't be easy." Prince Charles returned to his chair, looking older than William had ever seen him. The weight of royal responsibility had always been heavy, but this was something beyond normal constitutional duty. This was a choice between personal survival and moral obligation, between protecting the institution of monarchy and exposing the corruption that had infected it. "What evidence do you have?" Prince Charles asked quietly. "Beyond these documents and photographs?" Pemberton reached into his jacket and withdrew a small recording device. Conversations with operation controllers. Discussions about target selection. Planning sessions for future activities. Hours of recorded evidence spanning 3 decades. He set the device on the table. "Including conversations from last week, discussing your expected participation in renewed operations." William realized that they had reached the moment of truth. Whatever was on that recording device would either confirm or destroy everything Pemberton had claimed. The future of the monarchy, possibly the stability of the British government itself, hung in the balance. As Prince Charles reached for the device, William knew that there would be no going back from whatever they were about to hear. The comfortable lies that had sustained them all would be stripped away, leaving only the terrible burden of truth. Prince Charles held the recording device in his palm, as if it were a hand grenade with the pin pulled. The small black object represented the culmination of decades of secrets, the final piece of evidence that would either validate or destroy Marcus Pemberton's explosive claims. William watched the prince's face, seeing the internal struggle between hope that the accusations were false and fear that they might be true. "Before you play that," Pemberton said quietly, "you should understand what you're about to hear. These recordings will change how you see everyone around you. Your advisors, your government liaisons, perhaps even members of your own family. Once you know the truth, you can never unknow it. William felt the weight of that warning. As a security officer, he was trained to gather and process information objectively. But this wasn't routine intelligence. This was potentially evidence of treason at the highest levels of British society. Whatever was on that recording would burden him with knowledge that could make his continued service impossible. Prince Charles pressed the play button. The first voice William heard was crisp and authoritative, with the refined accent of someone educated at the finest institutions. He didn't recognize it immediately, but something about the cadence suggested familiarity. The transition provides us with unprecedented opportunities. Charles has always been more amenable to unconventional approaches than his mother. When he assumes the throne, we can expand operations beyond anything we achieved in the 80s. A second voice responded, this one carrying the measured tones of a career civil servant. Are we certain he'll cooperate? The reports from our psychological assessments suggest he may have developed ethical concerns about the program. William's blood ran cold. Psychological assessments? How long had the royal family been under covert observation and evaluation? Ethical concerns can be managed, the first voice replied with chilling casualness. Charles understands the importance of national security. He's seen what happens to countries that don't take proactive measures to protect their interests. Besides, he has little choice in the matter. Prince Charles's face had gone pale as he listened. These weren't historical recordings. The references to his eventual accession to the throne made it clear these conversations had taken place recently. The first voice continued. The beauty of Operation Sovereign Shield was always its deniability. Royal involvement provided perfect cover for activities that would have been impossible through normal government channels. With Charles as king, we can establish operations in every Commonwealth nation, use state visits as cover for asset recruitment, leverage diplomatic immunity for activities that would otherwise be impossible. The recording was describing the systematic corruption of the monarchy, turning it into a tool for international espionage, and possibly worse. Everything he had believed about the Crown's role as a neutral, stabilizing force in British society was being revealed as naive fiction. What about Windsor? The second voice asked. He's been asking questions about some of the older files. His security clearance gives him access to materials that might raise uncomfortable questions. Quote, William's attention sharpened. Windsor, they were talking about Prince Charles using his title before becoming king. Windsor will fall in line, the first voice replied confidently. He understands the consequences of non-cooperation. We have extensive documentation of his previous involvement. If he were to become difficult, those documents could surface in ways that would be highly embarrassing to the monarchy. The implication was clear. Prince Charles was being coerced into cooperation through threats to expose his past involvement in Operation Sovereign Shield. William began to understand the prince's earlier comments about questioning the institutions one served. The recording continued with increasingly disturbing details. William heard discussions of planned operations in Africa, Asia, and South America, arms deals disguised as cultural exchanges, intelligence gathering during state visits, the systematic exploitation of royal ceremonies and diplomatic functions for covert activities. More chilling still were the references to asset elimination and problem resolution. The euphemistic language couldn't disguise what was being discussed. Assassination and cover-up operations carried out under royal authority. The Iranian operation in '83 was particularly successful, the first voice noted with evident satisfaction. Using Andrew's military connections provided perfect cover for the weapons transfer. The target never suspected that British royalty was involved in his elimination. Prince Charles stopped the recording abruptly, his hand shaking. That's enough? He said quietly. Pemberton nodded grimly. There's hours more, sir. Detailed planning discussions, target assessments, operational reviews. Everything needed to prove that Operation Sovereign Shield has been using the royal family as unwitting accomplices in criminal activities for decades. William struggled to process what he had heard. The voices on the recording had spoken about murder, international arms dealing, and political manipulation as routine business matters. Worse, they had made it clear that these activities would continue and expand, with Prince Charles as an unwilling figurehead for their operations. Who are they? Prince Charles asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The first voice belongs to Sir Reginald Ashworth, Pemberton replied, currently serving as permanent secretary to the Cabinet Office. The second is Director James Whitmore from MI6. But they're just the tip of the iceberg. The network includes members of Parliament, senior military officers, major industrial leaders, even some members of the House of Lords. William felt his world continuing to collapse. These weren't foreign adversaries or criminal outsiders. They were the very people charged with protecting British interests, the individuals Prince Charles would work with most closely as king. They've spent 40 years building this network, Pemberton continued. Using Operation Sovereign Shield as the foundation, they've created what amounts to a shadow government, operating parallel to legitimate institutions but pursuing their own agenda. What agenda? Prince Charles asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Power and profit, Pemberton replied simply. National security became a convenient excuse for activities that primarily benefit a small group of extremely wealthy and connected individuals. They've used royal authority to facilitate arms deals that generate billions in profits, eliminate business competitors in developing markets, and manipulate international events to create investment opportunities. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. William had spent 22 years believing he was serving the crown and protecting British interests. Now he was learning that he might have been unknowingly protecting criminals who had corrupted the very institutions he revered. "Why are you telling us this now?" William asked, finding his voice despite his shock. "If this network is as powerful as you claim, exposing them would be incredibly dangerous." Pemberton smiled sadly. "Because I'm dying, Sergeant, and I've reached the point where the risk to my soul outweighs the risk to my life. I've spent decades enabling these people, believing I was serving my country. I want to die knowing I tried to stop them." He reached into his briefcase and withdrew another device, a small digital storage unit. "This contains everything: documents, recordings, photographs, financial records, communications, intercepts. 40 years of evidence showing how Operation Sovereign Shield corrupted the monarchy and subverted British democracy." Prince Charles stared at the device as if it were radioactive. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "That's entirely up to you, sir," Pemberton replied. "You could destroy it, pretend this conversation never happened, and accept your role as their figurehead. Many people in your position would make that choice. It's certainly the safer option." "Or?" Prince Charles asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Or you could use it to expose them," Pemberton said. "Reveal the corruption, dismantle the network, restore the monarchy to its proper constitutional role. It would be incredibly dangerous, possibly fatal, but it would be the right thing to do." William watched the exchange with growing dread. He was witnessing a moment that would define not just Prince Charles's reign, but the future of the British monarchy itself. The choice before them was stark: complicity in ongoing criminal activities or opposition to forces with the power to destroy them all. "There's a third option," Prince Charles said slowly. "I could refuse to cooperate with their operations without actively exposing them, simply decline to participate and force them to find alternative methods." "They've anticipated that possibility, sir. The psychological profiles I mentioned earlier include detailed assessments of your likely responses to various scenarios. They have contingency plans for non-cooperation." "What kind of contingency plans?" William asked, though he dreaded the answer. "The kind that ensure the monarchy continues to serve their purposes with or without your willing participation," Pemberton replied grimly. "They have enough evidence of past royal involvement to destroy the institution entirely, if necessary. They can create scandals, manipulate succession, even arrange accidents if required." The threat was clear. Prince Charles could cooperate willingly, or he could be coerced through blackmail and intimidation. Refusal wasn't really an option when dealing with people capable of such systematic corruption and manipulation. William's radio crackled softly, reminding him that their conversation was being monitored by the team in control. How many of the people listening to this conversation were part of the network Pemberton described? How many of his colleagues and superiors were complicit in the very conspiracy being exposed in this room? "The people monitoring this conversation," Prince Charles said, as if reading William's thoughts. "Do they know what you're revealing?" "Some of them certainly do," Pemberton replied. Commander Reynolds, for instance, has been part of Operation Sovereign Shield since 1995. Sir Geoffrey Hartwell has been coordinating political aspects of the operation for over a decade. William felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath him. Commander Reynolds, his immediate superior, someone he had respected and trusted for 7 years, was part of the conspiracy. Sir Geoffrey, who had briefed him just hours earlier about serving the greater good, was apparently serving something far more sinister. Then we're already compromised. Prince Charles said quietly, "They know everything we've discussed here." "Actually, no," Pemberton said with a slight smile, reaching into his jacket to produce a small electronic device. "This room has been electronically shielded since I arrived. I activated a signal jamming system that's been blocking all transmissions for the past hour. Whatever they think they've been hearing has actually been a recorded loop of routine conversation." William reached for his radio, trying to contact control but received only static. Pemberton was right. They had been operating in an electronic bubble, completely cut off from the outside world. However, Pemberton continued, his expression growing grave, that protection won't last much longer. "My equipment has limited battery life, and when it fails, they'll realize what happened. We probably have less than 30 minutes before they intervene." The time pressure added urgency to an already impossible situation. Prince Charles had to decide not just what to do about the evidence Pemberton had provided, but how to handle the immediate crisis of exposure. In 30 minutes, armed security personnel would storm into the room, and everyone present would face the consequences of this conversation. "What do you recommend?" Prince Charles asked. Pemberton placed the digital storage device on the table next to the recording equipment. "Take the evidence and run, sir. Leave the castle. Leave the country if necessary. Use your international connections to find sanctuary somewhere beyond their reach. Then release everything to the international press simultaneously." The suggestion was breathtaking in its simplicity and impossibility. Prince Charles couldn't simply flee the country like a common criminal. His constitutional obligations, his family responsibilities, his very identity were tied to the institution of monarchy. Running would mean abandoning everything he had been born and trained to protect. "And what about everyone else?" William asked. "What about the people who've served loyally without knowing about any of this?" "There'll be collateral damage," Pemberton admitted sadly. "The exposure of Operation Sovereign Shield will destroy many innocent careers along with the guilty ones. But the alternative is allowing the corruption to continue indefinitely, with more innocent people unknowingly supporting criminal activities." William felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on him. His duty as a security officer required him to protect Prince Charles and maintain institutional loyalty. But his conscience demanded that he expose the truth about criminal corruption at the highest levels of government. As if sensing his internal struggle, Prince Charles looked directly at him. "William, whatever happens in the next few minutes, I want you to know that I've never questioned your integrity or loyalty. The choice we face isn't about serving the crown. It's about deciding which crown we choose to serve." The minutes were ticking away, and soon the electronic shield protecting their conversation would fail. Whatever decision they made would have to be implemented quickly, before the forces arrayed against them could intervene. William realized that his 22 years of faithful service had been leading to this moment, when he would have to choose between institutional loyalty and moral obligation, between the crown he thought he served and the crown he had actually been protecting. The electronic shield protecting their conversation began to fail with a series of soft beeps from Pemberton's jamming device. Static crackled through William's radio as the connection to control gradually returned, and he could hear urgent voices trying to re-establish contact. They had perhaps 5 minutes before the full scope of their discussion would be discovered. Prince Charles picked up the digital storage device, weighing it in his palm, like a judge weighing scales of justice. "If I take this evidence public," he said quietly, "it will destroy the monarchy. Not just the corruption, but the entire institution. The British people will never again trust the crown." "Perhaps," Pemberton acknowledged. "But if you don't, the monarchy will become something far worse than destroyed. It will become a tool for evil, wearing the mask of constitutional authority. Future generations will suffer under a system that appears legitimate but serves only criminal interests." William watched the prince struggle with a choice that no constitutional training had prepared him for. The monarchs of Britain had faced wars, political crises, and social upheavals, but none had been asked to choose between preserving the institution and preserving its integrity. "There might be another way," William said suddenly, surprising himself with his boldness. "What if we expose the network without destroying the monarchy? Use the evidence selectively to remove the corrupt elements while protecting the institution itself?" Pemberton shook his head sadly. "The corruption goes too deep, Sergeant. Remove Ashworth and Whitmore, and a dozen others will take their place. This isn't about individual bad actors. It's about a systemic infection that has spread throughout the government and intelligence services." "But surely there are still honest people in positions of power," Prince Charles argued. "People who could help clean house without destroying everything." "Perhaps," Pemberton conceded. "But how would you identify them? How would you know who to trust when the conspiracy includes people at every level of government? The risk of approaching the wrong person could be fatal." The radio in William's ear suddenly burst to life with Commander Reynolds's voice. "Alpha 7, respond immediately. We've lost communication for the past hour and need immediate status report." William looked at Prince Charles, who nodded slightly. He pressed the transmit button. "Alpha 7 reporting. All secure in the private apartments. Minor technical difficulties with communication equipment." "Copy that, Alpha 7. Maintain position and stand by for immediate backup." The message was clear. Security forces were already mobilizing to intervene. Whatever decision they made would have to be implemented immediately. "They're coming," William said unnecessarily. Prince Charles stood and walked to his desk, opening a drawer to reveal a secure satellite phone, the kind used for emergency communications when normal channels were compromised. "I'm going to call someone," he announced. "Someone outside the normal government structure who might be able to help." "Who?" Pemberton asked urgently. "The Archbishop of Canterbury," Prince Charles replied, beginning to dial. "If anyone can be trusted to put moral obligation above institutional loyalty, it's him. And as spiritual advisor to the crown, he has constitutional authority to intervene in matters affecting the monarchy's integrity." It was a brilliant solution, William realized. The Archbishop occupied a unique position in British society, independent of government control, but with constitutional standing equal to the highest political offices. If anyone could provide sanctuary while they determined the best course of action, it would be him. The call connected quickly. "Your Grace," Prince Charles said without preamble, "I need your help urgently. I'm at Windsor and have evidence of criminal activity involving the government and intelligence services. I need immediate sanctuary and guidance on how to proceed." William couldn't hear the Archbishop's response, but he could see relief in Prince Charles's expression. "Yes, I understand the gravity," the prince continued. "I'm sending someone to you immediately with evidence. Please review it and advise on the best course of action." He paused. "No, I can't discuss it over any normal communication channel. This situation requires the highest level of discretion and security." As Prince Charles ended the call, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Heavy boots, multiple people, moving with military precision. The security response team was almost at the door. "William," Prince Charles said urgently, pressing the digital storage device into his hands, "I need you to get this to the Archbishop. Use the service tunnels beneath the castle. They lead to the old chapel and connect to the public roads beyond the security perimeter." "What about you, sir?" William asked, pocketing the device despite his certainty that carrying it made him a traitor to his oath of service. "I'll stay here and delay them as long as possible," Prince Charles replied. "They can't simply arrest the heir to the throne without creating a constitutional crisis. That should give you time to reach Canterbury." Pemberton was already gathering his documents, stuffing them back into his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "There's a backup copy of everything hidden at the Old Bailey," he told William quickly. "Storage Unit 247, Combination 1066. If anything happens to that device, the backup can be retrieved." The footsteps stopped outside the door. A firm knock followed, and Commander Reynolds' voice called out, "Your Royal Highness, we need immediate access for a security sweep. Please step away from the door." Prince Charles looked at William with an expression of profound gratitude and sadness. 22 years of faithful service has brought you to this moment," he said quietly. I'm sorry it has to end this way, but I'm grateful it's ending with honor rather than complicity. William understood that he was being dismissed not just from this room, but from his entire life of service to the crown. Whatever happened after this moment, he could never return to his former role. The knowledge he now carried made him either a protector of truth or an enemy of the state. There was no middle ground. "Go, Prince Charles," urged, moving toward the door. "And remember, whatever they tell you about duty and loyalty, real loyalty sometimes requires us to betray the institutions we serve in order to save them." William moved quickly to the bookcase that concealed the entrance to the service tunnels. The mechanism was known only to senior security personnel and members of the royal family. Another irony in a day full of them. He was using his privileged access to betray the very people who had trusted him with it. As the hidden panel slid open, William heard Prince Charles addressing the security team outside. "Gentlemen, you may enter, but I must inform you that you are interrupting a meeting of considerable constitutional significance." The last thing William saw before disappearing into the tunnel was Pemberton calmly sitting in his chair, briefcase closed, waiting with the resigned patience of a man who had already made peace with whatever consequences awaited him. The service tunnels beneath Windsor Castle dated back centuries, built as escape routes during times of siege, and later modified to house modern utilities and security systems. William had studied their layout during his initial security training, never imagining he would use them as an actual fugitive from the institution he served. As he made his way through the narrow passages, following signs toward the old chapel, William's mind raced with the implications of what he was doing. He was carrying evidence that could topple the British government, destroy the monarchy, and expose criminal activities spanning decades. The device in his pocket contained the power to rewrite history. Behind him, he could hear the muffled sounds of confrontation from the reading room, raised voices, demands for explanations, the controlled chaos of a security operation that had discovered something far beyond their expectations. He hoped Prince Charles could maintain his protection long enough for the evidence to reach safety. The tunnel emerged in the crypt of St. George's Chapel, among the tombs of monarchs who had ruled for centuries without facing the moral crisis now confronting their descendant. William paused for a moment among the ancient stones, feeling the weight of history and the burden of choice that connected him to the long line of people who had served the crown in times of crisis. His mobile phone buzzed with an urgent message from his wife, Sarah. "News reports say there's a security incident at Windsor. Are you safe?" William stared at the message, realizing that the events of this morning were already becoming public knowledge. The careful secrecy that had protected Operation Sovereign Shield for decades was beginning to crumble, and soon the entire country would be asking questions that no one in power wanted to answer. He texted back, "Safe, but situation is complicated. May not be home tonight. Trust me and don't worry." It was inadequate, but anything more detailed would put his family at risk. Once the security services realized he had taken the evidence, they would monitor every aspect of his life, looking for ways to pressure him into returning it. The chapel exit led to a small car park, used by visitors to the castle. William's personal vehicle was in the staff parking area, certainly under surveillance by now. Instead, he approached an elderly couple who were loading camera equipment into their car after what appeared to be a tourist visit. "Excuse me," he said, showing his security identification. "I'm conducting a routine security check. Would it be possible to examine your vehicle briefly?" The couple, clearly impressed by his official status, readily agreed. While pretending to inspect their car, William quickly assessed whether they would be suitable for his purposes. They appeared to be genuine tourists, showing no signs of surveillance, training, or suspicious behavior. "Actually," William said, making a decision that completed his transformation from loyal guardsman to fugitive, "I wonder if you could help me with something. I need to reach Canterbury urgently on official business, but my vehicle has developed mechanical problems. Would it be possible to give me a lift?" The couple, delighted to help someone who worked for the royal family, immediately agreed. As their car pulled away from Windsor Castle, William looked back at the ancient walls that had defined his adult life. Whatever happened next, he could never return to the simple certainties of his former existence. During the drive to Canterbury, William's phone rang constantly, calls from Commander Reynolds, Sir Geoffrey Hartwell, and numbers he didn't recognize. He ignored them all, knowing that any conversation would be an attempt to manipulate him into returning the evidence. The die was cast, and there was no turning back. The Archbishop's residence at Lambeth Palace represented sanctuary of a sort, but William knew it was only temporary. The forces that had corrupted Operation Sovereign Shield would not simply accept defeat. They would fight to protect their network, using every resource at their disposal to retrieve the evidence and silence those who threatened their activities. As Canterbury Cathedral came into view, William realized that his 22 years of faithful service had indeed brought him to this moment, not as an endpoint, but as a beginning. The comfortable certainties of institutional loyalty had been stripped away, replaced by the far more difficult burden of moral choice. The evidence he carried would either save the monarchy by exposing its corruption or destroy it by revealing how thoroughly it had been compromised. Either way, nothing would ever be the same for the institution he had devoted his life to protecting, for the country he had served with unwavering dedication, or for William Hayes himself. The day a royal guard saw Prince Charles confront the unthinkable had indeed changed everything. The only question now was whether that change would lead to redemption or destruction, to the restoration of honor or the collapse of centuries of constitutional tradition. As William approached the Archbishop's door, he carried with him not just evidence of criminal conspiracy, but the hopes of a nation whose faith in its institutions hung in the balance. The weight of that responsibility was crushing, but it was also liberating. For the first time in his adult life, he was serving something greater than mere institutional loyalty. He was serving the truth.